In October 1999, Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old nurse in Worcester, Massachusetts, vanished after her night shift at Memorial Hospital. Her car was found with the door open, keys in ignition. 3 days later, a mysterious email appeared in her husband's inbox. "Don't look for me." Police searched Quinsigamond Lake and the surrounding woods, but found nothing but a silver medical bracelet that wasn't hers. For years, theories circulated. Sarah fled from debt, she was kidnapped, she started a new life. The case went cold after 2 years. 22 years later, in 2021, a specialized search team brought advanced sonar to Quinsigamond Lake. Among 15 submerged vehicles, they found Sarah's white Honda Accord. Inside was her hospital ID, a leather glove, strands of black hair, and a startling photograph showing Sarah with Dr. James Conrad, her colleague who'd claimed they barely knew each other. That photo changed everything. It proved Sarah didn't vanish alone. Someone had been with her that October night, someone patient enough to believe their seemingly perfect crime would remain hidden for over 2 decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. On October 17, 1999, autumn's golden-red canopy hung over Worcester, Massachusetts, as Sarah Mitchell, a 34-year-old intensive care nurse respected by colleagues for her steady hands during crisis, left Memorial Hospital after a grueling night shift. The parking lot's halogen lights cast long shadows across her white Honda Accord as she walked toward it, phone pressed to her ear. Her husband Michael heard her final words, "I'm heading home now. Should be there in 20." Those words became the last thread connecting Sarah to her life as she knew it. By 9 a.m., when their colonial home on Grafton Street remained empty, Michael, frantic with worry, called the hospital, then the police. When officers arrived, they were struck by an unsettling detail. Sarah's personal phone lay charging on the kitchen counter. Her laptop screen glowed with an email sent at 11:43 p.m. "Don't look for me. I need space." The oddly terse message stood in stark contrast to her warm personality, as if composed under duress rather than genuine intent. Officer Thomas Reynolds noted in his initial report, "Husband describes victim as dedicated to patients, unlikely to abandon shift responsibilities or family without warning." Something about the scene felt manufactured. The open laptop, the charging phone, almost like someone wanted them to believe Sarah had willingly vanished. By morning, Worcester police mobilized a full-scale search. Yellow tape cordoned off the hospital parking lot where security cameras had malfunctioned the previous night. A coincidence that would later raise questions. K9 units followed scent trails toward nearby Quinsigamond Lake, their barking echoing through maple trees stripped bare by autumn winds. Police boats cut through the lake's surface, officers scanning the murky depths while helicopters buzzed overhead, searchlights sweeping across dense woodland surrounding Worcester's eastern neighborhoods. Dozens of nurses, doctors and neighbors joined the effort, wearing bright yellow vests, calling Sarah's name across valleys and hillsides, their voices growing hoarse as daylight faded. Near dusk, a volunteer's shout pierced the air. On the lake's eastern shore, half buried in mud, lay a silver medical bracelet engraved with a caduceus symbol. Everyone's hope surged momentarily, until lab tests confirmed the bracelet didn't match Sarah's DNA. Its presence near the lake remained an unexplained anomaly, like a puzzle piece from a different box. Meanwhile, a witness emerged. Elena Vasquez, a hospital cafeteria worker, reported seeing Sarah talking with a dark-haired man in the parking lot around 11:30 p.m. She described him as well-dressed, possibly a doctor, though the distance and poor lighting made identification impossible. "She seemed tense," Elena told detectives. Her shoulders were tight. "I couldn't hear what they said, but it wasn't friendly." Elena's statement dropped like a stone into the investigation's still waters, creating ripples of speculation. Who was this man? Was he the last person to see Sarah? When pressed for details, Elena could only add, he stood very close to her. Too close, like he was trying to intimidate her. Inside the Mitchell home, Michael paced relentlessly, his face haggard from sleeplessness. Their 7-year-old daughter, Lily, clutched her mother's sweater, breathing in the lingering scent of hospital antiseptic and Sarah's lavender perfume. "When is Mommy coming home?" she asked repeatedly, each question driving the knife deeper into Michael's heart. "Soon," he'd whisper, though his eyes betrayed mounting doubt. Officers noticed Michael's erratic behavior, sometimes angry, demanding more action, other times withdrawn, staring vacantly at family photos. Some detectives privately wondered if his grief masked guilt, a standard consideration in missing person cases. But Michael maintained his innocence, even offering to take a polygraph test, which he passed. Outside, Worcester transformed. The city, known for its prestigious university and historic architecture, became consumed by the search for Sarah Mitchell. News vans lined Grafton Street, their satellite dishes reaching skyward like metal trees. Reporters ambushed hospital staff, neighbors, anyone who might offer a crumb of information about the vanished nurse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As search efforts intensified, rumors spread through Worcester's tight-knit medical community. Some whispered Sarah had been struggling with depression after losing a young patient. Others suggested financial problems, perhaps gambling debts or secret loans. The most persistent rumor involved Dr. James Conrad, a respected neurologist who worked closely with Sarah on the intensive care floor. Hospital staff had noticed tension between them in the weeks before her disappearance. Once a nurse overheard Sarah telling him firmly, "This has to stop. I've made my decision." When questioned by police, Dr. Conrad appeared composed, almost detached, claiming they had merely disagreed about a patient's treatment plan. "We were colleagues, nothing more," he stated. "I was home with my wife the night she disappeared." His wife, Catherine Conrad, confirmed his alibi without hesitation, though something in her gaze, a flicker of uncertainty, caught Detective Reynolds' attention. He made a note to revisit the Conrads, but more pressing leads demanded attention first. 2 weeks into the investigation, police discovered Sarah's Honda Accord, abandoned at a shopping mall parking garage, 15 miles away. The driver's door was unlocked, keys in the ignition. Inside, they found her hospital badge on the passenger seat, but no signs of struggle. The car yielded little forensic evidence. A few fingerprints that matched Sarah and Michael, nothing to indicate who had driven it there or when. By December 1999, as the first snow blanketed Worcester, the investigation began losing momentum. Search areas had been combed multiple times. Lake Quinsigamond had been partially dragged. Hundreds of interviews had produced conflicting accounts, but no breakthrough. The FBI's involvement brought additional resources, but no resolution. Local media coverage dwindled as Christmas approached. The missing posters featuring Sarah's gentle smile, hazel eyes crinkling at the corners, chestnut hair falling past her shoulders, began to fade on community bulletin boards weathered by New England storms. In January 2000, Worcester police officially classified Sarah's case as long-term missing. Not cold, not closed, but indefinitely active, a bureaucratic limbo that offered little comfort to Michael and Lily Mitchell, who continued living in a house filled with Sarah's belongings, as if awaiting her imminent return. Michael channeled his grief into action. He established the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of missing persons. He appeared on national talk shows, describing the agony of not knowing whether to hope or mourn. "The worst part," he told viewers, "is living in perpetual uncertainty. We can't move forward or backward. We're frozen in October 1999. The years passed with sporadic developments. In 2002, a woman resembling Sarah was spotted in Portland, Maine. Police investigated but determined it was a case of mistaken identity. In 2005, an anonymous tip claimed Sarah had been seen working at a clinic in Arizona under an assumed name. Another dead end. By 2007, on the 8th anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, Michael faced a gut-wrenching decision. Lily, now 15, needed stability. The perpetual limbo was affecting her schoolwork, her friendships, her sense of security. With profound reluctance, Michael filed to have Sarah legally declared dead, a step that felt like betrayal, yet necessary for their daughter's well-being. The declaration came through in early 2008. A small memorial service was held at Trinity Church in Worcester, though Michael privately continued believing Sarah might still be alive somewhere. He kept her clothes in the closet, her favorite mug in the kitchen cabinet. Lily, entering her teenage years, began to distance herself from these rituals of remembrance, seeking normalcy among friends who hadn't grown up in the shadow of tragedy. While the community gradually forgot, Detective Thomas Reynolds did not. Now approaching retirement, he kept Sarah's file on his desk, reviewing it during quiet moments, convinced something had been overlooked. "The email never sat right with me," he confided to his partner. "It wasn't her voice. And that man in the parking lot, we never identified him conclusively." Reynolds had interviewed Dr. Conrad multiple times over the years, each encounter leaving him more suspicious, yet unable to build a case. Conrad had risen to become Memorial Hospital's chief of neurology, his reputation growing, while Sarah's memory faded. Reynolds noticed how Conrad would slightly tense whenever Sarah's name was mentioned, how his clinical detachment seemed too practiced, too perfect. In late 2018, Reynolds' retirement party was a subdued affair at a local Irish pub. Colleagues celebrated his career, while he silently mourned the cases he couldn't solve, particularly Sarah Mitchell's. As a parting gift, the department gave him his badge mounted in a shadow box. Reynolds accepted it with a tight smile, knowing he was leaving behind unfinished business. 3 months into retirement, Reynolds couldn't shake Sarah's case. He began compiling notes at his kitchen table, creating a timeline of events surrounding her disappearance. He contacted Michael Mitchell, now remarried, but still maintaining the foundation in Sarah's name. Together, they reviewed old files, searching for details that might have been missed or dismissed. Reynolds' breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While researching cold cases nationwide, he discovered a volunteer organization called Midwest Search and Recovery, specializing in using advanced sonar technology to locate submerged vehicles related to missing persons. Led by former Navy diver Marcus Bryant, the team had solved dozens of decades-old disappearances across America. Reynolds reached out, explaining Sarah's case and his suspicion that Quinsigamond Lake might hold answers. "The initial search was limited by 1999 technology," he explained. "Parts of the lake are over 80 feet deep, with silt buildup that would have hidden a vehicle from earlier detection methods." Bryant was intrigued. "We've found cars submerged for 50 years that local authorities missed multiple times," he responded. "Modern side-scan sonar can create detailed images of lake beds that were impossible back then." In May 2021, nearly 22 years after Sarah vanished, Marcus Bryant's team arrived in Worcester. Their specialized equipment drew curious onlookers to Lake Quinsigamond's shores. Michael Mitchell stood among them, now in his 50s, his hair grayed at the temples, holding on to hope that had never fully extinguished. The first day of scanning revealed nothing extraordinary. A few shopping carts, an old boat anchor, debris common to urban lakes. But on the second day, as Bryant's sonar swept the lake's northeastern quadrant, distinct shapes emerged on his monitor. "We've got multiple vehicles," he announced, marking locations with GPS coordinates. By day's end, Bryant had identified 15 distinct automobile shapes scattered across the lake bed, many clearly visible despite decades of submersion. "This isn't unusual," he explained to Reynolds and Mitchell. "Urban lakes often become dumping grounds for stolen vehicles or evidence disposal." Reynolds contacted Worcester police, who initially showed minimal interest, until Bryant mentioned one vehicle's dimensions and apparent model year matched Sarah Mitchell's Honda Accord. Suddenly, the cold case became active once more. A police dive team was assembled, working alongside Bryant's experts to investigate the submerged vehicles systematically. On May 17, 2021, 21 years and 7 months after Sarah's disappearance, divers descended to examine what appeared to be a white sedan, half buried in silt. Underwater cameras captured the moment. Headlights emerging from darkness, algae-covered doors, a license plate barely visible through sediment. When cleaned, the plate numbers confirmed what Reynolds had suspected. They had found Sarah Mitchell's car. The recovery operation drew crowds along the shoreline. News helicopters hovered above as specialized equipment slowly raised the vehicle, water cascading from its rusted frame. When the Honda finally emerged, it appeared almost ghostly, a time capsule from 1999 breaking the surface after 2 decades of silence. Investigators carefully processed the car on site, documenting every detail before transportation to the forensic lab. Inside the glove compartment, they found Sarah's hospital ID, waterlogged but preserved inside a plastic sleeve. On the backseat floor lay a single leather glove, high quality and masculine in design, clearly not belonging to Sarah. Most significantly, tangled in the passenger seat belt were several strands of black hair, inconsistent with Sarah's chestnut brown. And in the trunk, sealed inside a partially deteriorated plastic bag, was a photograph showing Sarah Mitchell standing beside Dr. James Conrad at what appeared to be a hospital function, their posture suggesting intimacy beyond professional colleagues. The photograph directly contradicted Conrad's repeated claims that he barely knew Sarah outside of work interactions. More damning still, written on the back in faded ink was a message: "This ends now. I've made my choice, S." As forensic teams processed the evidence, Reynolds felt vindication and sorrow simultaneously. His suspicions about Conrad had been justified, but confirming Sarah's fate brought no joy, only the grim satisfaction of finally approaching truth. Worcester police obtained a warrant to search Dr. Conrad's residence and office. The once respected neurologist, now 63 and planning retirement, appeared shocked when detectives arrived at his door. His wife, Catherine, standing behind him, turned pale as officers explained their purpose. In Conrad's home office, investigators discovered a locked cabinet containing old hospital files, including detailed notes on Sarah Mitchell that went far beyond professional documentation. They also found a collection of silver medical bracelets similar to the one discovered near the lake in 1999, suggesting the original finding wasn't coincidental, but deliberately planted. When confronted with the evidence, Conrad maintained his innocence. "This is absurd," he insisted. "I'm being framed." But his carefully constructed facade began crumbling when forensic results confirmed the black hair from the car matched his DNA profile. And the leather glove was identified as an expensive brand he was known to favor. The community that had gradually forgotten Sarah Mitchell now exploded with renewed interest. Memorial Hospital staff, past and present, were stunned that a colleague, especially one as respected as Dr. Conrad, could be implicated in such a case. Catherine Conrad filed for divorce within weeks, telling investigators she had harbored suspicions about her husband's behavior around the time of Sarah's disappearance, but had convinced herself she was being paranoid. As 2021 drew to a close, Worcester prepared for the trial that would dominate local headlines for months to come. Michael Mitchell, who had finally begun to accept his loss years earlier, now faced reopening wounds that had never fully healed. His daughter, Lily, now 29 and a physician herself, returned to Worcester to support him through the process. Thomas Reynolds, though long retired, became a central figure in the case. His persistence had kept Sarah's memory alive when official channels had moved on. As he reviewed his notes in preparation for testimony, he reflected on the nature of justice, how it sometimes arrived late but was no less necessary for the delay. The photograph found in Sarah's car revealed what many had suspected but couldn't prove. Sarah Mitchell hadn't simply vanished. Someone had silenced her, hidden her car, and crafted a narrative of abandonment to deflect suspicion. For 22 years, that someone had built a prestigious career while Sarah's family lived in torturous uncertainty. As the trial date approached, Worcester residents placed fresh flowers at an impromptu memorial near Lake Quinsigamond, a testament to a community finally confronting a tragedy it had allowed to fade into history. The waters that had kept Sarah's secret for so long now reflected a city awakening to difficult truths about power, deception, and the patient persistence required to uncover them. The trial of Dr. James Conrad began in March 2022 at Worcester County Courthouse, its marble columns and imposing facade a stark contrast to the raw emotions unfolding inside. The ornate courtroom was packed, with journalists and community members crowding wooden benches. Michael Mitchell sat in the front row, his shoulders rigid with tension, daughter Lily beside him, her face a mirror of her father's determination. District Attorney Victoria Hernandez, known for her methodical approach to cold cases, addressed the jury in her opening statement. 23 years ago, Sarah Mitchell was silenced. Her car was deliberately sunk in Lake Quinsigamond. Her absence was disguised as abandonment. Evidence will show Dr. James Conrad, a man who built his career and reputation while Sarah lay hidden, orchestrated this deception. Defense attorney Maxwell Greenwood countered with calm precision. The prosecution's narrative is compelling but fundamentally flawed. Submerged evidence is notoriously unreliable. Hair samples and photographs from a car underwater for over 2 decades prove nothing about my client's involvement. Dr. Conrad has dedicated his life to saving others. The state's case relies on speculation, not facts. Conrad sat motionless throughout both statements, his silver hair neatly combed, wearing an understated grey suit. At 63, he remained imposing, his posture perfect, his gaze direct, his expression revealing nothing. Only the slight tremor in his left hand suggested internal turmoil. The prosecution's first witness was Thomas Reynolds, now 72, his police badge years behind him, but his memory of the case painfully sharp. He detailed the initial investigation, voice steady despite emotion. From day one, things didn't add up. The email didn't sound like Sarah, her phone left at home, the hospital parking lot cameras malfunctioning that specific night, and Dr. Conrad's insistence they were merely colleagues, nothing more. Under cross-examination, Greenwood pressed Reynolds about his obsession with the case. Isn't it true you focused on Dr. Conrad for years without solid evidence? That you pursued this investigation into retirement because you couldn't accept failure? Reynolds leaned forward. I pursued truth, sir. Sometimes truth takes decades to surface. Forensic experts followed, explaining how evidence could survive underwater for years. Dr. Patricia Liu, head of Massachusetts State Crime Lab, testified that the black hairs found in Sarah's car matched Dr. Conrad's DNA profile with 99.7% certainty. The plastic bag preserving the photograph created a microenvironment that protected it from complete deterioration, she explained, as jurors examined photos of the evidence. The prosecution's case strengthened when Marcus Bryant took the stand, explaining how his team discovered Sarah's vehicle. Using computer animations, he demonstrated why previous searches had missed the car. It was in a depression about 76 feet deep, partially covered by silt. Technology in 1999 couldn't penetrate that depth with sufficient clarity. During a tense afternoon session, Catherine Conrad testified against her ex-husband. Her voice wavered as she recounted the night Sarah disappeared. James came home after midnight. He showered immediately, which was unusual after hospital shifts. His clothes went straight into the washing machine. When Sarah was reported missing the next day, he showed no surprise, just said she probably needed time away. She described finding a woman's earring in his car weeks later. When questioned, James claimed it belonged to a patient. I believed him then, Catherine said, her voice breaking. I wanted to believe him, but over the years, little inconsistencies accumulated. After the divorce filing, I found a key hidden in his desk to a storage unit I never knew existed. That revelation sent investigators to a small storage facility in neighboring Auburn. Inside Unit 23, they discovered boxes of Sarah's personal items, her nursing textbooks, family photos, even her passport. The jury visibly reacted when shown photos of these preserved belongings, items that should have remained in her home had she truly abandoned her life voluntarily. Michael Mitchell's testimony brought the courtroom to emotional stillness. He walked them through October 17, 1999, his last conversation with Sarah, the growing panic when she didn't return, the years of anguish that followed. When asked to identify the photograph found in Sarah's car, he froze momentarily. This was taken at the hospital fundraiser, September 1999. Sarah mentioned Dr. Conrad had been increasingly attentive. She was uncomfortable but didn't want workplace conflict. The defense objected, claiming hearsay, but Michael continued during redirect. My wife wasn't depressed or secretive. She wasn't planning to leave. We had tickets to take Lily to Disney World that Christmas. His voice cracked. She wouldn't have abandoned our daughter. As April arrived, Elena Vasquez, the cafeteria worker who witnessed Sarah's parking lot conversation, finally testified. Now in her 60s, she identified Dr. Conrad as the man she'd seen that night. He was standing too close like this, she demonstrated, invading the prosecutor's personal space. She kept backing away, but he followed. Their body language wasn't romantic, it was threatening. The prosecution's final witness was Dr. Rebecca Torres, a former medical resident who worked under both Conrad and Sarah in 1999. Sarah confided that Dr. Conrad had been inappropriate, suggesting they meet outside work. When she refused, he began criticizing her nursing decisions in front of patients. Torres described overhearing an argument weeks before Sarah's disappearance. She told him, "I've already spoken to HR. This ends now." He replied, "You have no idea what you're risking." I reported this to police in 1999, but nothing came of it. As the prosecution rested, public sentiment solidified against Conrad. Outside the courthouse, former patients and hospital staff gathered with signs reading, "Justice for Sarah," and "No one is above accountability." The defense began its case in late April, calling character witnesses, fellow physicians, community members, even patients whose lives Conrad had saved. Each painted a picture of a dedicated doctor, not a calculating killer. Forensic expert Dr. Lamar Washington questioned the reliability of underwater evidence. Submersion alters DNA samples. Cross-contamination is virtually guaranteed. The fact that Dr. Conrad's hair was found in the vehicle proves nothing about how or when it got there. The defense suggested alternative theories. Sarah might have been having an affair and fled when discovered. She might have been targeted by someone else entirely. The placement of her car could have been staged by someone with a grudge against Conrad. On May 2nd, Dr. Conrad himself took the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he was sworn in, his deep voice steady. He recounted his medical career, his dedication to neurosurgery, his grief at being accused. When asked about his relationship with Sarah, his demeanor remained clinical. "We worked closely in the ICU, professional respect, nothing more. The photograph shows a hospital fundraiser where all staff interacted. Any suggestion of impropriety is fabrication." During cross-examination, District Attorney Hernandez approached with quiet intensity. "If your relationship was purely professional, explain why you told investigators you barely knew Sarah, when photographs and witness testimony prove otherwise." Conrad's composure wavered slightly. "I misspoke. Under stress, one simplifies complex working relationships." "And the storage unit containing her personal belongings?" "I have no knowledge of such a unit. The key Catherine mentioned could be for anything. She's vindictive since the divorce." Hernandez placed the leather glove in an evidence bag before him. "This glove found in Sarah's car matches the exact brand and size you've worn for years." "Coincidence?" That style was common among physicians. "Many of us wore similar gloves. And your cell phone pinging near Lake Quinsigamond at 1:17 a.m. the night Sarah disappeared." Conrad hesitated. "I sometimes drove to clear my head after difficult shifts." As questioning continued, his carefully constructed responses began showing cracks. When pressed about the HR complaint Sarah had filed, he denied knowledge, but court records showed he had been officially notified. When asked why he washed clothes immediately upon returning home, his explanation about a coffee spill contradicted Catherine's testimony about mud on his shoes. By mid-May, closing arguments approached. Outside the courthouse, Worcester residents discussed the case in coffee shops and grocery stores. Sarah Mitchell, nearly forgotten for 2 decades, became present again in community consciousness. Memorial Hospital established a nursing scholarship in her name, and Lake Quinsigamond became a site of impromptu memorials. The night before final arguments, Michael Mitchell sat alone on a park bench overlooking the lake. The water rippled gently in spring breeze, peaceful despite its dark secret. Thomas Reynolds joined him silently, 2 men connected by absence, one who had lost a wife, the other who had never stopped searching. "Do you think we'll get justice tomorrow?" Michael asked. Reynolds considered the question. "Justice isn't just a verdict. It's the truth being spoken aloud after years of silence. In that sense, we've already won. Sarah's story isn't hidden anymore." On May 17, 2022, exactly 1 year after Sarah's car was recovered, closing arguments began. The courtroom was hushed, every seat filled. Some spectators had camped overnight to secure places, sensing historic finality approaching. District Attorney Hernandez addressed the jury deliberately, her voice resonant with conviction. "The evidence forms an undeniable pattern. Dr. Conrad's DNA in the vehicle, his documented harassment, his presence near the lake that night, the storage unit containing Sarah's belongings, his repeated lies to investigators. This isn't circumstantial, it's overwhelming." She held up the photograph found in Sarah's car. "This isn't just an image. It's the connection that survived 2 decades underwater to speak for someone who cannot speak for herself. Sarah Mitchell deserves to be heard at last." Defense Attorney Greenwood countered with equal intensity. "The state has constructed a narrative from fragments, ignoring legitimate alternative explanations. Dr. Conrad has saved countless lives. Are we to believe this dedicated healer suddenly became a calculating killer? The prosecution has failed to establish motive, means, or opportunity beyond reasonable doubt." The jury began deliberations that afternoon. Hours passed with no verdict. By evening, they were sequestered in a hotel. One day became 2, then 3. Outside the courthouse, speculation mounted. Was the jury deadlocked? Had the defense created sufficient doubt? On May 21st, after 4 days of deliberation, the jury reached a decision. As they filed back into the courtroom, their faces were solemn. The foreman, a retired schoolteacher, handed the verdict to the judge. Michael Mitchell gripped his daughter's hand. Thomas Reynolds held his breath. Dr. Conrad sat motionless, eyes forward. Judge Eleanor Patterson read, "In the case of Commonwealth versus James Conrad, on the charge of first-degree murder, the jury finds the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Michael covered his face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Conrad showed no reaction beyond a slight paling of his complexion. As officers approached to take him into custody, he stood with dignity, straightening his tie before extending his wrists for handcuffs. Judge Patterson scheduled sentencing for June, denying bail given the severity of the conviction. As Conrad was led away, he passed Michael Mitchell. For a brief moment their eyes met. One man who had lost everything, another who had hidden the truth for decades. No words were exchanged, but the tension between them was palpable. The verdict dominated national headlines. Justice after 23 years, doctor convicted in cold case murder, and Lake gives up its secrets. Massachusetts medical community rocked by verdict. Television specials recounted Sarah's story, analyzing how Conrad had maintained his facade for so long while building a prestigious career. In early June, before sentencing, investigators made another discovery. Based on information from Catherine Conrad, they searched a cabin property in western Massachusetts that James had owned since the 1990s. Behind the structure, using ground-penetrating radar, they located disturbed soil. Excavation revealed human remains, later identified through dental records as Sarah Mitchell. The medical examiner determined Sarah had died from blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with a single powerful blow. The estimated time of death matched the night of her disappearance. A silver necklace with a nurse's caduceus pendant remained around her neck, a gift from Michael on their 10th anniversary. At sentencing on June 15th, the courtroom was subdued. Michael Mitchell was permitted to deliver a victim impact statement. Standing at the podium, his voice steady despite emotion, he addressed not just Conrad, but the system that had failed his family for decades. Sarah was more than a missing person case. She was my wife, Lily's mother, a dedicated nurse who saved lives daily. For 23 years, we lived with unbearable uncertainty while her killer built a career founded on lies. Today, that uncertainty ends. He turned directly to Conrad. You took Sarah's life, but you don't get to own her story. That belongs to those who loved her, to the community that finally brought her home, to everyone who refused to let her be forgotten. Judge Patterson sentenced Conrad to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, adding, "This court recognizes that no punishment can restore what was taken from the Mitchell family. However, today's sentence affirms that justice, though delayed, will not be denied." As Conrad was led away, Catherine approached Michael in the hallway. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Part of me always knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't face it." Michael nodded, understanding the complexity of her position. We were both blind to different things. The conviction and sentencing brought profound changes to Worcester's institutional landscape. Memorial Hospital implemented mandatory reporting protocols for harassment complaints. The police department established a specialized cold case unit with advanced forensic capabilities. Lake Quinsigamond underwent comprehensive exploration, leading to recovery of several other vehicles connected to unsolved disappearances dating back to the 1980s. For Thomas Reynolds, the conviction brought both vindication and a measure of peace. In July, he visited Sarah's newly established gravesite in Worcester Cemetery. He placed a single white rose beside her headstone, which read, "Sarah Mitchell, 1965-1999. Beloved wife, mother, healer. Truth finds a way." Reynolds reflected on the winding path that had led to this moment, from initial investigation to retirement obsession to final resolution. The system had failed, then eventually corrected itself through persistence and technological advancement. In that correction lay a lesson about justice's patience. For Lily Mitchell, now 30, the discovery of her mother's remains created a complex, emotional landscape. Having grown up with ambiguity, she now had concrete reality to process. In August, she established a foundation focused on supporting children of missing persons, recognizing the unique trauma she had experienced. Children in these situations live with a specific kind of grief, she explained in an interview. Not knowing whether to hope or mourn creates developmental challenges most counselors aren't trained to address. Our foundation aims to change that. Michael Mitchell faced his own journey of recalibration. For decades, he had maintained dual mindsets, living his life while simultaneously searching for Sarah. With her remains recovered and Conrad convicted, he entered unfamiliar emotional territory. The certainty of her death, while painful, allowed him to finally begin proper mourning. In September 2022, he sold their house on Grafton Street, the home he'd maintained all these years, preserving Sarah's belongings as if she might return. The decision was both practical and symbolic, acknowledging that his life's suspended animation could finally end. "Sarah wouldn't want me living in a museum," he told Lily, as they sorted through the house. "She'd want me to move forward, same as she'd want for you." Worcester itself underwent a process of communal reckoning. The case exposed uncomfortable truths about power dynamics within prestigious institutions. Dr. Conrad had been protected by his status, his complaints against him minimized due to his contributions to the hospital. Institutional soul-searching led Memorial Hospital to commission an independent review of historical harassment complaints, resulting in several administrative resignations and policy overhauls. By fall 2022, the case's ripple effects reached statewide policy. The Massachusetts legislature passed Sarah's Law, mandating preservation of evidence in missing persons cases and establishing funding for advanced search technologies. The bill recognized that technological advancements could someday resolve cases that seemed unsolvable with current methods. In October, on the 23rd anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, a memorial bench was dedicated along Lake Quinsigamon's eastern shore. The bronze plaque read, "In memory of Sarah Mitchell and all those still missing. May truth surface no matter how deep it lies." The dedication ceremony brought together unusual allies, police officers who had worked the original case, Marcus Bryant's volunteer search team, hospital staff who had known Sarah, and community members who had followed the case for decades. Their collective presence represented the interconnected efforts required to achieve resolution after so many years. Marcus Bryant, whose sonar technology had been instrumental in finding Sarah's car, reflected on the experience during the ceremony. Technology is just a tool. What matters is the human determination behind it. This case succeeded because people refused to stop asking questions, refused to accept that some secrets stay buried forever. Dr. Rebecca Torres, whose testimony about Conrad's harassment had strengthened the prosecution's case, spoke about institutional accountability. Systems protect themselves unless we demand better. Sarah reported harassment through proper channels and was ignored. Her story reminds us that silence serves perpetrators, not victims. Thomas Reynolds, standing beside Michael and Lily Mitchell, observed the gathering with quiet satisfaction. At 73, he had devoted nearly a third of his life to Sarah's case, refusing to let it fade into statistical obscurity. Now, watching diverse community members united in remembrance, he recognized that justice was more than a courtroom verdict. It was restoration of narrative truth. As winter approached, media interest gradually subsided, but Sarah's story continued influencing Worcester in subtle ways. Local schools incorporated the case into ethics curricula, discussing institutional responsibility and the importance of reporting concerns. The police academy added a cold case module focused on technological advances in evidence recovery. Memorial Hospital established mandatory bystander intervention training for all staff. For Michael Mitchell, the approaching holidays brought bittersweet reflection. This would be his first Christmas with absolute certainty about Sarah's fate. No more wondering if she might call, might return, might somehow be alive elsewhere. The finality was painful yet freeing, allowing grief its natural progression after decades of suspension. In early December, he received an unexpected letter from Catherine Conrad, now living in Vermont. She wrote of finding old photos of hospital functions where Sarah appeared, offering them to Michael if he wanted this additional piece of his wife's life. Her letter concluded, "We were both victims of James's deception, though in vastly different ways. I hope finding Sarah has brought you some peace." Michael wrote back, accepting the photos and acknowledging their shared experience of having trusted someone who betrayed that trust completely. Their correspondence, though brief, represented another form of healing, recognition that Conrad's deception had created multiple casualties beyond Sarah herself. As the year drew to a close, Lily Mitchell completed her medical residency and accepted a position at Boston Children's Hospital. Her choice of pediatrics, rather than following her mother into intensive care, was deliberate. "I wanted to honor her legacy of healing without retracing her exact path," she explained. "Every child I help is part of continuing what she started." On New Year's Eve, Michael visited Sarah's grave alone. The headstone was adorned with holiday decorations from well-wishers, a small wreath, battery-powered lights twinkling in the dusk. He brushed snow from the marble and sat beside it, speaking aloud as if in conversation. "They say truth always rises," he said softly. "I'm not sure that's guaranteed, but in your case it finally did. I hope that brings you peace wherever you are." As darkness fell over Worcester Cemetery, lights from the city reflected off new fallen snow. Michael remained sitting beside Sarah, no longer haunted by uncertainty, but embracing the complex reality of grief finally allowed its natural course. In January 2023, the Massachusetts Department of Corrections transferred Dr. James Conrad to MCI Cedar Junction, the state's maximum security prison in Walpole. The former neurologist, once accustomed to hospital corridors and operating theaters, now navigated concrete hallways under constant surveillance. His medical license had been formally revoked, his assets frozen pending civil litigation from the Mitchell family. The prestigious career built over decades had collapsed entirely. While Conrad adjusted to incarceration, Worcester continued processing the case's aftermath. Memorial Hospital's internal investigation expanded beyond Sarah Mitchell, uncovering 3 additional harassment complaints against Conrad from 1995-2003 that had been dismissed or buried by previous administrations. Each complainant, all female nurses or residents, described similar patterns of intimidation and unwanted attention. These revelations prompted hospital administration to issue a formal apology at a February press conference. Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anita Sharma acknowledged the institutional failures. "We failed these women. We prioritized reputation over safety, and in doing so became complicit in a culture of silence that ultimately contributed to tragedy." That changes today. The hospital implemented comprehensive reforms, including anonymous reporting systems with third-party oversight, mandatory investigation protocols regardless of the accused's status, and trauma-informed support for complainants. These changes, while too late for Sarah, represented tangible commitment to preventing similar situations. Thomas Reynolds, whose persistence had been instrumental in resolving the case, found his retirement transformed. Law enforcement agencies and universities invited him to speak about cold case methodology and the impact of emerging technologies. In March, he addressed criminal justice students at Worcester State University, his decades of experience distilled into practical wisdom. "Technology evolves faster than our systems for using it," he told students. The Lake Quinsigamond search in 1999 used the best methods available then. Those methods missed Sarah's car by mere feet because we couldn't see through silt or scan deep depressions effectively. 23 years later, improved sonar found 15 submerged vehicles in that same lake. Reynolds paused, letting the implications sink in. The lesson isn't just about better equipment. It's about humility, acknowledging that today's certainty might be tomorrow's error. Never assume a case is unsolvable just because current methods can't resolve it. His lecture sparked discussions about other regional cold cases that might benefit from technological reassessment. Students formed a volunteer research group focused on cataloging unsolved disappearances near bodies of water throughout New England, creating a database for future search operations. By April 2023, Marcus Bryant's Midwest Search and Recovery Team had completed comprehensive scanning of Lake Quinsigamond. Beyond the 15 vehicles initially identified, they located 7 more deeply embedded in lakebed sediment. Working with state police, they recovered each vehicle systematically, documenting every step. Most proved to be stolen cars dumped for insurance fraud or abandoned vehicles. However, 2 yielded evidence connected to other missing persons cases: a 1987 Chevrolet Impala linked to Robert Dempsey, missing since 1992, and a 1994 Ford Explorer containing identification belonging to Jennifer Castillo, who vanished in 1996. The Dempsey case gained particular attention when forensic analysis revealed blood samples matching 3 different individuals in the vehicle's trunk. DNA profiles entered into national databases identified one as Keith Barrows, a convicted felon who died in prison in 2010 while serving time for unrelated charges. State Police Captain Andrea Lawson held a press conference addressing these developments. "The Conrad case has opened doors we didn't know existed. Lake Quinsigamond appears to have been used repeatedly as a disposal site for evidence. We're now exploring whether these cases share common elements or perpetrators beyond the location." This announcement intensified public speculation about potential connections between Conrad and other disappearances. Internet forums buzzed with theories about accomplices, cover-ups, or organized criminal activities. Most theories lacked substantive evidence, but the fundamental question remained valid. Had Conrad acted entirely alone in Sarah's murder, or were others involved? In May, a potential answer emerged from an unexpected source. Catherine Conrad contacted prosecutors with information she had initially withheld. Details about a hunting cabin in Vermont registered to a shell company rather than directly to James. Police obtained a search warrant for the property, located in a remote area of the Green Mountains. The cabin appeared unremarkable from outside, a simple structure on 20 wooded acres. Inside, investigators documented a meticulously organized space with hospital-grade cleaning supplies and medical equipment. The basement, accessible through a concealed entrance beneath a rug, contained a room with soundproofed walls, examination table, and restraints. Forensic teams spent weeks processing the site, collecting hair samples, fingerprints, and materials for DNA analysis. Luminol testing revealed extensive blood evidence despite thorough cleaning. Most significantly, they recovered a journal hidden within a wall cavity, written in what appeared to be Conrad's handwriting, but in coded language. Cryptanalysts from the FBI worked to decipher the journal, while forensic teams continued analyzing physical evidence. By July, preliminary results linked DNA samples from the cabin to 2 additional missing women: Teresa Rosario, a pharmaceutical representative last seen visiting Memorial Hospital in 2001, and Diane Knowlton, a patient who disappeared after an appointment with Conrad in 2004. This discovery transformed public understanding of the case. Conrad wasn't merely a harassment-turned-murderer. Evidence suggested a calculated predator operating for decades. The revelation sent shockwaves through Worcester and the broader Massachusetts medical community. Patients who had been under Conrad's care contacted authorities with renewed concerns about unusual experiences during examinations or inexplicable memory gaps following procedures. In August, Michael Mitchell filed a civil lawsuit against Memorial Hospital, alleging institutional negligence for ignoring harassment complaints that preceded Sarah's murder. The suit named specific administrators who had dismissed reports about Conrad's behavior, arguing their inaction directly contributed to creating an environment where he operated without consequences. Hospital attorneys initially prepared to contest the suit, but as evidence mounted about the extent of Conrad's activities and the pattern of ignored warnings, their position became untenable. By September, the hospital board approved a settlement agreement that included substantial financial compensation and funding for a permanent Sarah Mitchell Center for Patient Safety and Advocacy within the institution. The center would focus on training healthcare workers to recognize and report concerning behaviors, emphasizing that patient and staff safety outweighed professional courtesy or institutional reputation. The settlement acknowledged that financial compensation couldn't restore what the Mitchell family had lost, but attempted to create meaningful change from tragedy. For Lily Mitchell, now established in her pediatric practice in Boston, the ongoing revelations about Conrad created complex emotions. Learning the full scope of his actions is both validating and horrifying, she told a documentary filmmaker chronicling the case. Validating because it confirms what we suspected about the man who took my mother. Horrifying because it means others suffered while the system protected him. She participated in developing curriculum for the Sarah Mitchell Center, ensuring that patients' and families' perspectives remained central to healthcare ethics training. Her dual identity, daughter of a victim and physician within the same system, provided unique insights into institutional dynamics that often silenced concerns. Medical hierarchies create fertile ground for abuse, she explained during a panel discussion at Harvard Medical School in October. When a surgeon or specialist's technical skill is valued above their behavior, when revenue generation outweighs ethical concerns, we create environments where predators can operate with impunity. My mother reported concerns through proper channels, but those channels prioritized Conrad's reputation over her safety. As 2023 drew to a close, the FBI completed decoding Conrad's journal. The contents proved more disturbing than anticipated. Detailed accounts of 16 women targeted over 20 years, including Sarah Mitchell. The journal revealed calculation rather than impulsivity, describing selection criteria, approach strategies, and methods of evidence disposal. 8 of the 16 women remained missing, their cases previously unconnected to Conrad. Joint Task Force operations began examining locations mentioned in coded entries, including remote areas in New Hampshire, Vermont, and western Massachusetts. Ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs searched properties Conrad had accessed through medical conferences, hunting leases, or shell company ownership. By December, remains of 3 additional victims had been recovered, bringing closure to families while simultaneously confirming the extent of Conrad's activities. Each discovery reopened wounds in the Worcester community, challenging residents to reconcile the respected physician they had known with the predator revealed through investigation. The case's expansion attracted national media attention, with major networks producing documentaries examining how Conrad had maintained his facade for decades. These productions focused not just on his crimes, but on the systemic failures that enabled them: institutional protections for high-status individuals, dismissal of complaints from lower-ranking employees, and cultural resistance to acknowledging potential predators in prestigious positions. In January 2024, Conrad faced additional charges related to newly identified victims. Prosecutors from multiple jurisdictions coordinated efforts, ensuring comprehensive accountability while sparing families the trauma of multiple trials. Conrad maintained his silence, refusing interviews or comment on the expanding case against him. For Thomas Reynolds, the case's evolution brought both vindication and somber reflection. Now approaching 75, he had devoted much of his life to pursuing justice in Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. The resolution had expanded beyond anything he had initially imagined, revealing a pattern of predation that spanned decades. "I always believed Sarah's case was wrongfully abandoned," he told Michael during a quiet meeting at a local diner. "But I never anticipated this scale. Each victim deserved the same persistence we finally brought to Sarah's case. The system failed them all." Michael nodded, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. "That's why the foundation work matters so much now. We're not just looking back at what happened to Sarah. We're trying to prevent it from happening to someone else's wife, someone else's mother or daughter." The Sarah Mitchell Foundation had evolved significantly since Conrad's conviction, expanding from supporting families of missing persons to advocating for institutional accountability and systemic reform in healthcare settings. Michael served as its public face, traveling to hospitals and medical schools throughout New England to share Sarah's story and its implications. In February 2024, he addressed Memorial Hospital's graduating medical residency class, standing at the podium where Conrad had once presented research findings. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone present, especially older staff members who remembered both Sarah and Conrad from their time at the institution. "Medicine is built on power differentials," Michael told the residents, "between doctor and patient, supervisor and trainee, administrator and staff. These differentials are sometimes necessary for functional systems, but they become dangerous when they shield misconduct or silence concerns. Your technical knowledge matters, but your commitment to creating safe environments matters equally." He described how Sarah had followed proper protocols, reporting harassment through designated channels, only to have her concerns minimized or dismissed. The system told her to trust the process, but the process was designed to protect the institution, not her. Your challenge is to build systems that protect the vulnerable rather than the powerful. The residents, soon to enter practice with full responsibilities, listened with solemn attention. Many had chosen Memorial specifically because of its transparency in addressing past failures and commitment to reform. They represented a generation entering medicine with awareness of how institutional cultures could enable harm. In March 2024, Lily Mitchell established a scholarship for children who had lost parents to violent crime, particularly those involving long-term disappearances. The specific trauma of not knowing, of living with perpetual ambiguity, shapes development in profound ways, she explained at the scholarship announcement. These children need educational support, but also specialized resources for navigating grief that lacks closure. The scholarship provided both financial assistance for higher education and access to therapeutic programs addressing the unique psychological impacts of unresolved loss. Initial funding came from the settlement with Memorial Hospital, but community donations quickly expanded its reach, allowing support for students across Massachusetts. April brought the dedication of a permanent memorial at Lake Quinsigamond, not just for Sarah, but for all victims eventually connected to Conrad's actions. Rather than traditional statuary, the memorial took the form of a walking path around the lake's northeastern shore, with meditation gardens and informational plaques discussing both the cases and the reforms they had inspired. The dedication ceremony brought together diverse stakeholders: law enforcement, medical professionals, victims' families, and community members. Worcester's mayor spoke about institutional responsibility, acknowledging that multiple systems had failed to protect vulnerable individuals over decades. Our city bears collective responsibility for allowing these tragedies to unfold. True healing requires acknowledging that complicity. Marcus Bryant, whose sonar technology had been instrumental in breaking the case open, reflected on technology's role in justice. Tools are advancing faster than systems for implementing them, he noted. Every law enforcement agency should regularly reassess cold cases in light of new capabilities, not waiting for families to advocate or volunteers to intervene. His organization had received federal grant funding to establish training programs for police departments nationwide, focusing on implementing advanced search technologies in water-related missing persons cases. The program, named Project Surface, would train officers from departments with limited resources, democratizing access to techniques previously available only through specialized volunteer groups or expensive private contractors. By summer 2024, the criminal proceedings against Conrad had concluded with additional life sentences for each victim identified through journal entries and forensic evidence. Though he would never leave prison, the comprehensive prosecution ensured that each victim's story became part of official record rather than remaining unacknowledged. For Michael Mitchell, watching the case expand had been both painful and validating. During a quiet moment at the Lake Memorial in July, he shared reflections with a documentary filmmaker chronicling the case's impact on Worcester. When Sarah first disappeared, I felt utterly alone in my search for answers, he said, gazing across the water that had hidden her car for 23 years. As time passed, that isolation grew. People moved on, cases closed, life continued around a hole that never filled for me and Lily. He traced the memorial plaque's engraving with his fingertips. The most profound change since finding Sarah isn't just having answers about what happened. It's the transformation of private grief into communal reckoning. Her story isn't isolated anymore. It's connected to institutional accountability, technological advancement, systemic reform. That connection means her life and death matter beyond our family. The filmmaker asked about forgiveness, whether Michael had found any peace regarding Conrad or the systems that failed Sarah. He considered the question carefully before responding. Forgiveness implies an endpoint, a resolution. What I've found instead is purpose, channeling grief into making sure other families don't experience what we did. That purpose doesn't require forgiving Conrad. It requires transforming systems that protected him. In August, Thomas Reynolds published a memoir titled Surface Truth: Pursuing Justice in the Sarah Mitchell Case. The book detailed his decades-long involvement, from initial investigation through retirement obsession to eventual resolution. Rather than focusing solely on Conrad's crimes, Reynolds examined how institutional barriers had hampered the original investigation and subsequent attempts to reopen the case. Missing persons investigations reflect our societal values, he wrote in the conclusion. When we allow cases to go cold prematurely, when we assign resources based on victims' social status or media attention, when we dismiss possibilities because they implicate powerful figures, we make statement about whose disappearance matters and whose doesn't. Every cold case represents a promise broken to someone waiting for answers. That day, the book became required reading in criminal justice programs throughout New England, prompting discussions about procedural reforms and ethical responsibilities in investigations. Reynolds donated all proceeds to the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, supporting families navigating the limbo of unresolved disappearances. By fall 2024, 5 of Conrad's 16 journal-documented victims remained unaccounted for, despite extensive searches. The task force refused to close these investigations, maintaining active status and regularly reviewing evidence as technologies continued advancing. This commitment represented significant departure from previous practices, where cases routinely went cold after initial efforts yielded no results. Captain Andrea Lawson, overseeing the ongoing investigations, emphasized this shift during a law enforcement conference in September. We've historically treated cold cases as low priority, allocating minimal resources once initial leads were exhausted. The Conrad case demonstrates why that approach fails victims. Technology and methodologies evolve constantly. Yesterday's unsolvable case might be resolved with tomorrow's tools if we maintain commitment. On the 25th anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, October 17, 2024, Memorial Hospital held a symposium addressing healthcare power dynamics and institutional responsibilities. Speakers included Lily Mitchell, Thomas Reynolds, and administrators from institutions that had implemented reforms inspired by the case. The day-long event combined academic analysis with personal testimony, examining concrete policy changes while honoring the human cost that had necessitated them. Dr. Anita Sharma, still serving as Chief Medical Officer, opened the symposium with unflinching assessment of the hospital's historical failures. Institutions protect themselves unless deliberately structured not to, she stated. Memorial Hospital chose self-protection over accountability for decades. That choice enabled ongoing harm while betraying our fundamental purpose as healers. The reforms implemented since Conrad's conviction aren't just procedural adjustments, they're ethical recalibration. The symposium concluded with panel discussion featuring Michael Mitchell, Catherine Conrad, and family members of other victims. Their conversation focused on recognizing warning signs in professional settings and the courage required to speak against authority figures. Catherine's participation represented her ongoing effort to address her unwitting role in Conrad's double life, not through self-flagellation but through educating others about manipulation tactics used by high-functioning predators. James cultivated an impeccable public persona, she explained to the audience. His professional accomplishments created a shield that deflected scrutiny. When concerns arose, he leveraged that reputation to dismiss them as jealousy or misunderstanding. The system believed him because it was easier than questioning someone so apparently exemplary. As 2024 drew to close, the ripple effects of the case continued expanding. The Massachusetts legislature passed comprehensive healthcare workplace safety legislation, establishing independent oversight for harassment complaints within medical institutions. The Mitchell-Rosario Act, named for Sarah and Teresa Rosario, created standardized reporting protocols that prevented institutions from handling allegations internally without external review. Law enforcement agencies throughout New England established formal protocols for reassessing cold cases when new technologies became available. Rather than waiting for family advocacy or media attention, departments committed to systematic review processes triggered by technological advancements or methodology changes. For Michael Mitchell, these systemic changes represented Sarah's enduring impact. During a December interview marking the 5th anniversary of the Sarah Mitchell Foundation, he reflected on the unexpected trajectory from personal tragedy to institutional reform. When you're living through grief, especially the ambiguous grief of a disappearance, you can't see beyond the immediate pain, he said. You're just trying to survive each day, to keep pushing for answers when systems want to move on. You can't imagine that individual persistence might eventually transform those same systems. He described watching Memorial Hospital's culture change, police procedures evolve, and legislative reforms take shape, all stemming from the search for one person. Sarah was one woman who disappeared on one night in Worcester. Finding her wasn't just about our family's closure. It exposed cracks in systems designed to protect power rather than vulnerable individuals. Addressing those cracks has created safer environments for countless people who will never know her name. As the new year approached, Lily Mitchell prepared to expand her foundation's work nationally, establishing support networks for children of missing persons in states beyond Massachusetts. The psychological impact of ambiguous loss creates unique developmental challenges, she explained. These children need specialized support that traditional grief counseling doesn't address. They're living in suspended animation, unable to process loss definitively. Her programs combined therapeutic approaches with practical assistance, educational support, financial guidance, and community building among families sharing similar experiences. Having lived through this specific trauma, Lily understood nuances that even well-intentioned mental health professionals often missed. The most damaging aspect isn't just grief, she noted during a training session for counselors. It's the constant oscillation between hope and despair. One day you're planning for reunion. The next, you're contemplating funeral arrangements. That pendulum swing exhausts the spirit in ways that definitive loss, however painful, doesn't. On New Year's Eve, Michael Mitchell visited Sarah's grave with Thomas Reynolds and Marcus Bryant, the three men whose collective efforts had finally brought her home. They stood silently in the cemetery, snow falling gently around them, each reflecting on their part in the long journey toward justice. Reynolds, now 76, placed a hand on the headstone. "This case changed how I understand justice," he said quietly. "It's not just verdicts and sentences. It's systems transforming to prevent the same failures. It's technology advancing to find what we couldn't before. It's institutions acknowledging harm instead of hiding it." Bryant nodded, watching snowflakes accumulate on the granite marker. Most people think justice means punishment for wrongdoing. But sometimes it's simply truth emerging after years of darkness. The lake gave up its secret when we had the right tools to ask properly. Michael listened, feeling the familiar ache of Sarah's absence alongside the quiet satisfaction of knowing her story had changed so many systems for the better. As midnight approached, bringing a new year neither he nor Sarah could have imagined back in 1999, he placed white roses at the base of her headstone. "You always said one person could make a difference," he whispered. "You were right, though not in the way either of us expected. Your absence reshaped this city. Your story taught institutions about accountability. Your memory protects others who will never know they needed protection." As the three men walked back through falling snow, lights from Worcester illuminated the sky. The city had been transformed by one cold case, its institutions forced to confront uncomfortable truths about power, silence, and responsibility. Sarah Mitchell's story had emerged from the depths of Quinsigamond Lake to change systems that had once failed her, ensuring her legacy extended far beyond the tragedy of her disappearance. In February 2025, The Massachusetts state legislature convened a special session to address unresolved issues surrounding the Conrad case. Despite the criminal proceedings having concluded, questions lingered about institutional accountability beyond Memorial Hospital. Senator Elaine Patterson, chair of the Public Safety Committee, initiated hearings examining how Conrad had maintained his practice despite multiple red flags across decades. This case exposes gaps in our professional licensing and oversight systems, Patterson stated in her opening remarks. We need to understand not just what happened to Sarah Mitchell and the other victims, but why our safeguards failed so completely. The hearings called witnesses from various institutions, the State Medical Board, hospital administration, police departments, and victims' advocates. Their testimony painted a troubling picture of compartmentalized information and diffuse responsibility, where warning signs visible to multiple entities never coalesced into a comprehensive assessment of risk. Dr. Martin Geller, who had served on the State Medical Licensing Board during Conrad's early career, admitted the system prioritized technical competence over character concerns. We had a process for evaluating clinical skills, but minimal protocols for addressing behavioral complaints unless they reached criminal threshold. Conrad maintained impeccable credentials while compartmentalizing his predatory behavior. This institutional focus on credentials rather than character had allowed Conrad to advance professionally despite concerning patterns. His technical brilliance in neurosurgery created a halo effect, causing colleagues and administrators to dismiss or minimize behavioral red flags. Diane Ferris, who had worked as Memorial Hospital's HR director in the early 2000s, testified about institutional barriers to addressing complaints. We operated under a culture that treated physician conduct as untouchable unless absolutely egregious. The hierarchical structure meant nurses reporting concerns about doctors faced scrutiny themselves, their motives questioned, their professional judgment dismissed. The hearings revealed that Sarah Mitchell's complaint hadn't been the only one buried. Between 1998 and 2007, 5 formal reports about Conrad's behavior had been filed at Memorial alone, with additional concerns raised at conferences and inter-hospital collaborations. None had triggered comprehensive investigation. Each institution assumed another was addressing the issue, or that isolated incidents didn't warrant action, testified Dr. Catherine Lim, a healthcare safety consultant. This diffusion of responsibility created perfect conditions for a predator to operate across jurisdictional boundaries. Senator Patterson's committee drafted legislation requiring centralized reporting of professional conduct concerns across healthcare settings. The proposed system would track patterns rather than treating each complaint in isolation, triggering automatic review when multiple reports accumulated regardless of severity. The Conrad case demonstrates that predatory behavior rarely manifests in a single catastrophic incident, Patterson explained during a March press conference. It's a pattern of escalation that becomes visible only when we connect seemingly minor dots across time and institutions. While legislative reform progressed, Michael Mitchell focused on expanding the Sarah Mitchell Foundation's reach. In April 2025, he launched a national database for families of missing persons, creating centralized resources previously scattered across jurisdictions. The system connected families with similar cases, technological resources, and legal guidance navigating complex bureaucratic processes. When Sarah disappeared, I spent months just learning which agencies to contact, which forms to file, which timelines applied, Michael explained during the database launch. That administrative burden falls on families already experiencing the worst moments of their lives. This platform streamlines those processes so energy can focus on the search itself. The database included specialized sections for cases involving bodies of water, recognizing the unique challenges these environments presented for evidence recovery. Marcus Bryant's team provided technical guidance, creating accessible explanations of sonar technologies, underwater forensics, and search methodologies. By summer 2025, the database had registered over 800 families nationwide, creating the largest civilian-led missing persons resource in American history. Its structure allowed cross-referencing between cases, identifying potential patterns invisible to isolated local jurisdictions. This national perspective yielded unexpected connections. In June, database analysts noticed similarities between cases in Massachusetts, Vermont, and upstate New York, all involving medical professionals who disappeared after raising concerns about colleague conduct. This pattern prompted reopening several investigations, revealing potential links to Conrad's professional network. "We're not suggesting conspiracy," Michael clarified during a CNN interview, "but we're seeing how professional environments that silence whistleblowers create vulnerabilities that predators exploit. These cases share institutional conditions rather than coordinated perpetrators." The Foundation's work attracted attention from federal agencies seeking to modernize missing persons protocols. In July, the FBI invited Michael to address a training session for agents specializing in cold cases and long-term disappearances. His presentation focused on technological opportunities for case reassessment rather than emotional impact. "Emotion fueled my search for Sarah," he told the assembled agents. "But technology made that search successful after 23 years. Your challenge is institutionalizing technological reassessment without requiring family members to become experts in sonar imaging or DNA recovery methods." His practical approach resonated with law enforcement professionals accustomed to bureaucratic resistance. Several regional FBI offices subsequently established formal protocols for cold case technological review, creating standardized timelines for re-examining evidence using emerging methods. Meanwhile, Lily Mitchell's work with children of missing persons expanded through academic research partnerships. In August, she collaborated with Harvard Medical School to publish the first comprehensive study of psychological impacts specific to unresolved disappearances. The research distinguished this experience from other forms of trauma, identifying unique therapeutic approaches. "Children in these situations experience ambiguous loss," Lily explained during an academic conference. "They can't progress through normal grief stages because uncertainty prevents closure. Their development occurs in emotional limbo, creating distinctive challenges that standard trauma approaches don't adequately address." Because the study documented higher rates of anxiety disorders, attachment difficulties, and risk avoidance behaviors among children whose parents had disappeared without resolution, compared to those who experienced parental death through known circumstances. These findings informed specialized therapeutic protocols implemented in clinics nationwide. Lily's personal experience infused her professional work with authentic understanding. During therapy groups for children of missing persons, she occasionally shared aspects of her own journey. The birthday cards she'd continued writing to her mother for years, the way she'd imagined Sarah watching her graduation, the complex relief of finally knowing the truth. "The human mind needs narrative completion," she told these children. "When that's denied, we create internal stories to fill the void. Those stories often involve self-blame or magical thinking. Learning to recognize and address those patterns doesn't erase the pain, but it prevents additional self-inflicted wounds." In September 2025, Thomas Reynolds received unexpected recognition for his decades of persistence. The International Association of Cold Case Investigators established the Reynolds Award for Investigative Perseverance, honoring law enforcement professionals who maintained commitment to unresolved cases beyond institutional timeframes. The inaugural ceremony in Boston brought together detectives from across the country, many who had pursued cases long after official resources were redirected. Reynolds, visibly moved by the recognition, used his acceptance speech to redirect attention to victims and families. I'm grateful for this honor, but let's be clear, persistence shouldn't be extraordinary in our profession, he stated firmly. Every victim deserves the same relentless effort, regardless of media attention, family advocacy, or case complexity. The fact that we're celebrating exceptional persistence highlights a systemic problem. Too many cases abandoned before all possibilities are exhausted. His speech prompted uncomfortable reflection among law enforcement leadership present. Reynolds had articulated a fundamental tension in investigative practice, the pragmatic allocation of limited resources versus the ethical imperative to pursue every case with equal determination. This tension became central to police reform discussions throughout New England. In October, the Massachusetts Police Training Council implemented curriculum changes, emphasizing technological continuity in cold cases. Rather than treating investigations as linear processes with defined endpoints, the new approach framed them as continuing responsibilities periodically revisited as capabilities evolved. The Conrad case demonstrated how technological advancement can resolve seemingly unsolvable cases, explained Training Director Robert Chen. Our responsibility extends beyond initial investigation. We must maintain case integrity until resolution, regardless of how long that takes. These reforms coincided with the 26th anniversary of Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Worcester marked the occasion with a community remembrance walk around Lake Quinsigamond, retracing the path where Sarah's car had remained hidden for 23 years. Hundreds participated, including hospital staff, police officers, local officials, and families of other victims. Michael Mitchell led the procession, walking alongside Catherine Conrad. Their unlikely alliance, the victim's husband and the perpetrator's ex-wife, symbolized the complex human dimensions beyond criminal justice narratives. Both had lost their spouses to Conrad's actions, though in profoundly different ways. Catherine and I share a unique perspective, Michael explained to participants. We both trusted someone who betrayed that trust absolutely. We both lived with constructed realities that collapsed when the truth emerged. Our experiences differ dramatically, but we understand the disorientation of discovering your life was built on deliberate deception. Catherine nodded, adding, "Healing doesn't mean forgetting or minimizing. It means integrating painful truth into a new understanding that allows forward movement." James destroyed lives, including aspects of my own. Acknowledging that reality fully is essential to building something meaningful beyond it. Their public cooperation challenged simplistic victim narratives, demonstrating how tragedy could foster unexpected connections and mutual support. Several families of Conrad's other victims had initially resented Catherine, viewing her as complicit through silence. Her willingness to face their anger while continuing advocacy work gradually transformed antagonism into cautious alliance. In November, the FBI forensic team completed analysis of Conrad's coded journal, publishing findings in a redacted report that protected victims' privacy while documenting methodological approaches. The analysis revealed Conrad's meticulous recording of victim information, methods, and location details, a chronicle of predation spanning nearly 25 years. The journal demonstrates classic organized offender characteristics, stated FBI analyst Sophia Reyes during a press briefing. The coding system evolved over time, but maintained consistent internal logic. References to specific locations allowed recovery of remains in cases previously unconnected to Conrad. By year's end, all 16 victims mentioned in the journal had been identified, with remains recovered for 14. The final 2 cases involved locations now inaccessible due to construction or environmental changes, but families received confirmation through DNA evidence found at Conrad's Vermont cabin. This resolution, while painful, provided closure for families who had lived with uncertainty for decades. Memorial services were held throughout Massachusetts, Vermont, and New York, honoring women whose disappearances had previously generated minimal attention or investigation. In December 2025, Michael Mitchell published Finding Sarah, a memoir chronicling the 26-year journey from disappearance to resolution and systemic change. Rather than focusing solely on Sarah's case, the book examined broader implications for missing persons investigations, institutional accountability, and technological evolution in forensic science. This story isn't just about one missing woman or one predator who escaped justice for decades, Michael wrote in the introduction. It's about systems designed to compartmentalize information rather than connect it. It's about technological capabilities outpacing institutional willingness to apply them. It's about whose disappearance warrants sustained attention and whose fades into statistical obscurity. The book became a bestseller, sparking national conversation about cold case methodologies and institutional responsibilities. Michael donated all proceeds to the Foundation's Technology Access Program, which provided advanced search equipment to law enforcement agencies with limited resources. As 2025 concluded, Memorial Hospital implemented the final phase of reforms initiated after Conrad's conviction. The Sarah Mitchell Center expanded from staff training into patient advocacy, creating accessible reporting systems for concerns about provider conduct. The center's architecture symbolized its mission: transparent glass walls, open sight lines, visible proceedings, contrasting sharply with the opacity that had previously sheltered misconduct. Dr. Rebecca Torres, who had testified about witnessing Conrad's harassment of Sarah, became the center's inaugural director. Her appointment represented institutional recognition that whistleblowers deserved leadership roles rather than marginalization. Healthcare hierarchies traditionally punish those who question authority, Torres noted during the center's dedication. Sarah Mitchell followed proper channels and was silenced. This center exists to ensure that silence never happens again, that concerns receive transparent investigation regardless of who raises them or who they implicate. The center's approach extended beyond addressing individual complaints to examining systemic conditions enabling misconduct. This structural focus distinguished it from traditional grievance processes that treated each incident in isolation without identifying institutional patterns. In January 2026, as nationwide interest in the Conrad case gradually subsided, Worcester faced the challenge of incorporating these lessons permanently, rather than allowing them to fade with media attention. Mayor Gabriela Suarez announced the creation of a permanent public safety task force dedicated to maintaining reforms implemented since the case's resolution. Communities often implement changes immediately after tragedy, then gradually return to previous patterns as memory fades, Suarez explained. This task force ensures Worcester remembers not just what happened to Sarah Mitchell and Conrad's other victims, but why our systems failed them and how we've committed to preventing similar failures. The task force included representatives from law enforcement, healthcare, victims advocacy organizations, and family members of missing persons. Its structure institutionalized the cross-disciplinary cooperation that had eventually broken the Conrad case, creating formal channels for information sharing across traditionally siloed domains. For Thomas Reynolds, watching these systemic changes unfold brought profound satisfaction as he approached the final chapter of his life. At 77, he had witnessed his persistent questioning transform from career obsession to institutional legacy. During a quiet dinner with Michael and Lily Mitchell in February, he reflected on this unexpected journey. When I joined Worcester Police in 1972, investigations were considered successful if they secured convictions, he recalled. The Conrad case taught me that true success extends beyond courtroom outcomes to systemic transformation. Sarah's story changed how institutions function. That impact outlasts any single verdict. Lily, now directing a regional pediatric trauma center specializing in children of missing persons, nodded thoughtfully. I've realized something similar in my work. Individual healing matters enormously, but creating environments that prevent trauma matters more. Mum's case prompted institutional changes that will protect countless people who'll never know her name. Michael, who had become a nationally recognized advocate for missing persons reform, considered how grief had transformed into purpose. For years, I defined justice as finding Sarah and holding Conrad accountable. Those goals drove me through unimaginable darkness. But justice has expanded beyond that individual scope to institutional accountability and systemic change. Their conversation represented the case's enduring impact, 3 lives irreversibly altered by tragedy, who had channeled that alteration into meaningful reform. While personal pain remained, its destructive potential had been redirected toward constructive change, creating legacy beyond loss. In March 2026, the Sarah Mitchell Foundation partnered with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Persons to establish standardized protocols for lake and river searches nationwide. The protocols incorporated technologies pioneered by Marcus Bryant's team, creating accessible methodologies for departments with limited specialized training. Water recoveries require specific approaches often unavailable to local jurisdictions, Bryant explained during the protocol launch. These standardized procedures allow any department to conduct preliminary assessment before determining whether specialized equipment is necessary, potentially identifying submerged evidence that traditional methods would miss. The protocols reflected lessons from Lake Quinsigamon's systematic exploration, grid-based search patterns, depth mapping, silt penetration techniques, and documentation standards, ensuring evidence integrity during recovery. These technical specifications transformed what had previously been specialized knowledge into broadly accessible methodology. By spring 2026, over 50 police departments nationwide had implemented these protocols, resulting in vehicle recoveries connected to 12 cold cases. While not all yielded evidence as significant as Sarah's car had, each represented potential resolution for families living with uncertainty, the same uncertainty that had defined Michael and Lily's lives for 23 years. In April, Lily expanded her therapeutic work into digital spaces, launching an online support network for families of missing persons. The platform combined professional resources with peer support, recognizing that shared experience offered unique validation unavailable through traditional counseling. Professional therapy remains essential, Lily explained during the platform launch. But there's irreplaceable value in connecting with others who truly understand the specific weight of ambiguous absence, who know what it means to set a place at holidays just in case, or to scan every crowd. For a familiar face years after rational hope has faded, the platform created specialized groups addressing different aspects of unresolved disappearance: parents of missing children, children of missing parents, siblings, spouses, and extended family. Each group received tailored resources addressing their specific challenges, from navigating legal limbo to explaining absence to younger generations. As summer approached, Worcester prepared for a significant transition. Memorial Hospital's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Anita Sharma, announced her retirement, concluding a tenure defined by post-Conrad reforms. Her replacement, Dr. Eliza Washington, had served as the hospital's first accountability officer, AEC, position created specifically to prevent recurrence of institutional failures that had enabled Conrad's activities. Dr. Washington's appointment symbolized permanent, institutional commitment to transparency rather than temporary response to crisis. Her background in both clinical practice and healthcare ethics positioned her to maintain reforms while advancing patient care standards. Dr. Sharma led Memorial through its darkest period and implemented crucial reforms. Washington acknowledged during the transition announcement, "My responsibility extends beyond maintaining those changes to embedding them so deeply in institutional culture that they become indistinguishable from standard practice." This cultural integration represented the most challenging aspect of reform, moving beyond compliance with new protocols toward genuine internalization of values they represented. Washington described this as transforming checklists into mindsets, where protection of vulnerable individuals became reflexive rather than mandated. In July 2026, Michael Mitchell traveled to Washington, D.C. to testify before a congressional committee considering federal legislation modeled on Massachusetts reforms. The proposed Missing Persons Technological Review Act would establish mandatory timelines for reassessing cold cases when relevant technologies advanced significantly. Michael's testimony focused on practical implementation rather than emotional appeal. He detailed specific technologies that had resolved Sarah's case after 23 years, explaining how standardized review protocols could democratize access to these capabilities across jurisdictions regardless of resources. The technology that found my wife existed for years before we applied it to her case, he explained to the committee. That gap represents administrative failure rather than technological limitation. This legislation ensures capabilities reach cases systematically, rather than depending on extraordinary advocacy from exhausted families. The bill garnered bipartisan support, with committee members from both parties recognizing that missing persons cases transcended political divisions. Its focus on technological application rather than expanded bureaucracy appealed to efficiency-minded legislators, while its human impact resonated with those prioritizing compassionate governance. As the bill progressed through congressional processes, Worcester marked another milestone in its recovery journey. In August, Memorial Hospital formally renamed its intensive care unit, where Sarah had worked, as the Mitchell-Torres Intensive Care Center. The name recognized both Sarah and Dr. Rebecca Torres, who had risked professional standing by testifying about Conrad's behavior. The renaming ceremony brought together hospital staff, community members, and families of Conrad's victims in collective acknowledgement of institutional transformation. Dr. Torres, now directing the Sarah Mitchell Center, reflected on the symbolic significance. Renaming physical space matters because environment shapes behavior, she noted during her remarks. When healthcare providers enter this unit daily, they're reminded not just of Sarah's dedication as a nurse, but of the institutional courage required to maintain safe environments for patients and staff alike. The ceremony included unveiling a memorial wall featuring quotes from Sarah's nursing students and colleagues, preserving her professional legacy beyond her identity as a victim. This multidimensional remembrance allowed the community to honor her life's work, alongside acknowledging the tragedy of its premature end. By fall 2026, the ripple effects of the Conrad case had transformed multiple systems across Massachusetts and beyond. Police departments implemented cold case review protocols triggered by technological advancement rather than external pressure. Medical institutions established transparent reporting systems with independent oversight. Legislative reforms created accountability mechanisms spanning jurisdictional boundaries. For Michael Mitchell, watching these changes unfold brought complex emotions. Pride in Sarah's enduring impact alongside grief that such impact came at such devastating cost. During a quiet October evening at Lake Quinsigamon's Memorial Pathway, he shared reflections with Thomas Reynolds about this bittersweet legacy. Some days I wish none of this had happened, that Sarah had simply come home that night, that we'd grown old together, that Lily had her mother through adulthood, Michael admitted, watching autumn leaves drift across the water's surface. But since that reality was stolen, I find meaning in how her absence transformed systems that failed her. Reynolds nodded, understanding the complex calculus of grief and purpose. Sarah's case changed how I understand justice itself, he replied. It's not just punishment after harm occurs. It's creating environments where harm becomes less likely, where warning signs trigger intervention before tragedy becomes inevitable. Their conversation represented the essence of the case's lasting impact, shifting focus from reactive justice to preventive accountability, from individual culpability to institutional responsibility. While Conrad would spend his life imprisoned, the true measure of justice extended beyond his incarceration to systems permanently altered by Sarah's story. As 2026 concluded, Worcester prepared for the final phase of memorialization. The city commissioned a permanent installation at Memorial Hospital's entrance, a sculpture designed with input from families of all 16 victims identified through the investigation. Rather than focusing solely on loss, the artwork incorporated elements representing institutional transformation and renewed commitment to protecting vulnerable individuals. The sculptor Renata Diaz described her approach during the December unveiling. This installation honors lives lost while simultaneously looking forward. The broken circular forms represent systems that failed these women, while new growth emerging through those breaks symbolizes reforms their stories inspired. It acknowledges profound loss without allowing tragedy to become the final word. The ceremony brought together the extensive community that had formed around the case: law enforcement, healthcare workers, families, advocates, and citizens who had followed the story through its many phases. Their collective presence testified to how one cold case had transformed an entire community's understanding of institutional responsibility and justice. Michael Mitchell, standing with Lily beside the installation, felt the weight of 27 years since Sarah's disappearance. They had lived longer without her than with her, yet her presence remained defining force in their lives and work. The foundation bearing her name had helped hundreds of families navigate similar journeys, while reforms inspired by her case had created lasting change in systems that had once failed her. As evening fell over Worcester, lights illuminated the new memorial, casting gentle shadows across inscribed names of 16 women whose stories had finally been acknowledged. Michael touched Sarah's name, feeling familiar texture of grief alongside newfound sense of completion. "Your story changed everything," he whispered. "Not just for us, but for systems that needed transformation. That legacy continues beyond all of us." Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.